Why the fuck don't you stay where you belong, back in Yo-Yo Land?
Today I'm going to be talking about a film called Hardcore. This was released in 1979 and it stars George C. Scott as a Midwestern businessman whose daughter goes missing whilst on a church group field trip to California. And with the assistance of a private eye played by Peter Boyle, George C. Scott discovers that his daughter has become involved in pornography, to which he naturally shits his lid. Then commences on an odyssey through the underbelly of the Los Angeles, San Francisco, sex world, vice world. Along the way, he meets a sex worker called Nikki, played by Susan Hubley, who from then on assists him in his search. This film was written and directed by Paul Schrader, who, from my point of view, I'm most familiar with as the guy who wrote Taxi Driver, which obviously deals with very dark and gritty subject matter, as does this film. And this film does well in depicting the skeezy, sleazy, nasty, gritty, sex underworld, vice, brothels, prostitution, pornography, all that kind of shit. So the film begins in its depiction of a wintry scene, country song that's got kind of religious overtones to it.
Memories, unseen angels.
That's contrasted with the opening titles, which are a very heavy, bold font that's black, but then for a couple of the titles changes to a very lurid red colour. Just against this backdrop of wholesome Americana, if you will, just gives that sense that something bad is about to, encroach upon this world. And this is also underpinned by the score by Jack Nitzsche, which initially it consists of a kind of religious theme, on an organ. But gradually becomes more and more distorted, like a discordant note, or just some kind of sound effect to kind of make it sound more warped. It creates a feeling of impending unease as events unfold. Something bad is on the way in terms of story plot wise. And this all commences in the scenes where George C. Scott's trying to find out what happened with his daughter. This is before he discovers that she is becoming embroiled in pornography.
You find out if she knew somebody out here. A friend, a relative. Maybe somebody she knew somebody out here.
By Peter Boyle. Discovers an 8mm film reel, which involves his daughter doing a porno with two men, and he shows George C. Scott this in this adult theatre that he's hired out for an hour or so. And this is one of the most notable scenes in the film for George C. Scott's acting, because as he's watching this, you just see him kind of crumble and break down.
Turn it off, please.
It's just this range of emotions going through in a split second. It's like anger and pain and sadness and despair and horror, all these kind of things, and it just comes out in his performance in just those few seconds, and it's fucking brilliant. So after he discovered his daughters, this is what's happened. He, as I said, begins on a quest for an odyssey through the underworld of this LA nighttime sex vice land.
I want to talk to you about this girl. I have her picture right here.
Pull out your cock.
What?
Paul Schrader, is no stranger to dealing with gritty subject matter, dark, and it does nail the atmosphere in this. You do feel the skis kind of come off the screen at you in some parts, and also this is again underpinned by the music by Jack Nitzsche. Jack Nitzsche. Where it goes to like an electronic kind of score, but it's weird. It's almost like a horror movie vibe. That's what it reminded me of. Not like a supernatural horror, but more like a kind of zombie horror of that period, where it's kind of got a very apocalyptic electronic vibe to it. It gives it this really nasty, fucking dirty, fucking sick slow descent into hell as he progresses through the story. And it's kind of what this is, you know. George C. Scott's having to walk through this world that is totally alien and horrible to him. After trying to find his daughter by looking around and asking questions in the brothels and sex shops to no avail, he puts a phony porn audition in like the yellow pages, and like holds a phony porn audition.
Jim Slum. Sometimes they call me Jism Jim.
It turns out he's one of the dudes that was in the film with his daughter. So after he interrogates him a bit, he's given the name of someone who may be able to help him, a girl called Nikki. He goes to see her in a nudie booth, which is another scene which really captures in my mind, it really stuck in my mind as just a really sleazy fucking... There's like paper towels on the floor and fucking jizz stains up on the glass where Ponce has been fucking bashing one off while she's been, I don't know, doing whatever. And it's just, you just feel kind of dirty just watching it. So he enlists the help of her from then on. They go from LA to San Francisco, I think. And as the film progresses, they have a lot of dialogue with one another, and you almost get like a father and daughter, not vibe, but the generational gap. You get his point of view and her point of view in terms of attitudes towards sex and religion and just times, I guess.
This culture, everything's based on sex, sold on sex. Magazines, music, TV.
So the journey progresses, and it gets darker even more when it leads George C. Scott into like the world of BDSM and snuff. So eventually, George C. Scott does find his daughter. This is where we learn that she got involved in this voluntarily, because he was under the assumption she'd been kidnapped and forced into it.
You never gave a fuck about me before. You didn't. So don't touch me now. I didn't fit into your goddamned world.
As much as I do like this film, I didn't think enough attention was paid to the character of the daughter and kind of the backstory between her and her father, George C. Scott. I mean, obviously, the whole daughter getting involved with pornography because of daddy issues is somewhat of a cliche, perhaps. Not in the film, but just in reality. You know, the whole journey through the sex world and the dialogue between George C. and Susan Hubley's character Nikki. That was all great, and then in the third act, where we get into like this kind of BDSM and like snuff type of world, character called Rattan, who's into like the snuff stuff, who's a bit of a villain. He kind of felt shooed in at the last moment, and the ending was all kind of tied up very quickly. I thought, because the first two acts, it takes its time, it establishes an atmosphere and a world. One thing about the final act I do like is where George C. Scott's fighting with this bloke in this BDSM dungeon, and he's throwing him through all these kind of cardboard walls that are between like the different dungeons. They've got a different kind of vibe, and each one's lit very vividly and very differently. It's like dark midnight blue, and then like really like lurid red, and then green. and the action's slowed down. So like the women there are like screaming, but it's slowed down, and so it's like kind of almost like a like an animal kind of roar. It's visually and audibly kind of, you know, unsettling. And then we just kind of see George C. Scott leave with his daughter, and Season Hubley's just like swallowed back up into this neon wilderness again. It's quite, you know, it's a powerful visual, you know, it's a powerful visual note to end on. But yeah, overall, this is a great film, really good film, really fantastic acting from George C. Scott. Of course, the scene in the theatre, in a porno theatre, that alone validates his credibility in this movie. Season Hubley, I thought she was good at kind of playing a kind of whacked out chick, not whacked out, but someone who's been through drug addiction and just been through that life for a while, and beyond that, she was a bit too stoned. Not stoned, but it just didn't ring as sincere to me. Excuse me. She was still very good. I mean, the bits in the nudie booth where she's there completely stark, as you know, with the old sporran showing and that. She's, you know, just... Peter Boyle's character, the Private Eye, was very... I couldn't get a handle on who he was, what he was about. He's nearly as degenerate as the people is, you know, investigating and stuff.
Why the fuck don't you stay where you belong, back in Yo-Yo Land?
He likes the company of, well, he employs prostitutes, shall we say, and he sits in on, he knows all like the porno directors, and he sits in on a porno shoot early on in the film. I guess he was kind of the voice of the underbelly.
I'll find out what I can.
She know anything about this?
Who, the whore? Ah, she's the victim. I'm a dozen.
Letting the audience know through the eyes of George C. Scott what this world was. As dark as this film is, there is moments of like humour, you know, dark humour.
Don't talk that way to me, you cockeyed bastard.
Man, don't you know who I am? I'm Big Dick Black. I've done more porno movies than you ever saw.
The music I've mentioned a couple of times already was brilliant, because like I said, there's that the religious themes that they have in the beginning of the film, and then it changes to like that lurid electronic score, which I, like I said, kind of gave the film a horror movie vibe. It gave me a horror movie feeling. And then this is also kind of counterbalanced with a very harsh bluesy electric guitar. So that gives it a kind of very street sleaze vibe to it, but it doesn't give it that dark, ominous tone that the electronic score did. So, you know, that balanced it, the vibes out well. In terms of the film as a whole and what it's trying to depict, it pulls it off, definitely. It, you know, just shows like the dirt, it gives the dirt on it. But like I said, I felt like it felt all rushed in the final act to tie it all up. But overall, this film is great, and if very powerful. It's very powerful visually, performance-wise, and musically. If I had to think of any other films that were reminiscent of Hardcore, it would be 8mm, obviously, because it's working around similar areas. Hardcore, I highly recommend you watch it if you've not seen it. You'll never watch pornography with a clear mind again, which sucks because I feel guilty enough when I masturbate already. See ya.
Bollocks!